Welcome to another installment of the GitOps with Terraform Bootcamp 2024. Now that you've done all kinds of work with GitHub Actions, we're going to show an easy way to deploy your infrastructure while hitting all of the requirements in a single file. We're going to use the recently open sourced tool Terrateam. Now we've got the co-founder Malcolm Metalka here to show us how it's done. Welcome, Malcolm.
Thank you. Pleasure to be back.
So, as we all remember, we've been deploying infrastructure using GitHub Actions. I know I've seen some unbelievably cool projects that some of you have submitted. Some of them are, I think I've seen upwards of 15 to 20 GitHub Actions in some of these projects. And all these GitHub Actions are maintained by other maintainers, so the sprawl gets kind of crazy. I mean, the projects are super cool, but again, dealing with all of these dependencies can be a huge pain. And now that you have open sourced Terrateam, it seems like it's probably going to be a great solution for a lot of companies who are looking to simplify this whole process. So Malcolm, you are here to show us how that is done and how you have, in a single file, completed all of the steps in the bootcamp. So if you don't mind, take it away and show us how it's done.
Yeah, great. So for those that did the bootcamp, you'll know that GitHub Actions is incredibly powerful, but at the same time, it's almost kind of too low level if you need a lot of interaction between those actions that ran. And in the Terraform and OpenTofu world, you often need to do things such as create a plan, store that plan somewhere, because that's the plan you want to get approved. And also, that's the plan, once approved, that you want to apply. You don't want that change to plan. You want that plan to change at some point in the future. And GitHub Actions can solve a lot of that if you want to make a big project out of it. But it really gets large and, in my opinion, complicated. So Terrateam, one of the important things we have, or important values we have, is we want you to have to learn as few new tools as possible. So we want you to stay inside of GitHub to do your daily work. We want to use the tools you're comfortable with. So we use GitHub Actions, although we do a lot of the work inside of a single GitHub action, and then we use a server to store state. And as Derek said, we're also recently open source. So you can run what we're going to show here on your own. We have some pretty good directions on how to get it going on your laptop for testing purposes. So the rubric followed, it had a few requirements, mostly around validating things and cost estimation and doing some policy checks. So in Terrateam, everything you're going to do to configure it is in this .terrateam config YAML. And what's really great about the configuration being part of your code base is you can, for example, make a branch and modify the configuration, and Terrateam will consume the configuration in that branch. So it's a good way to experiment with a new workflow you want to try. And if it works out, you merge it back into main, or if it doesn't work out, you just delete the branch. You don't have to worry about configuring another piece of software a different way than how it is in your repository. Our configuration is pretty expressive. You can do a lot with it. But we're going to focus on what's in the rubric.
Yep.
So to start out
I can
with,
see there you're using a little tofu action, not Terraform. So is there
yeah,
anything you need to do differently because you're using OpenTofu, or is it all pretty much drop-in replacement?
complete drop-in replacement. There is some
Awesome.
new functionality they're working on that if you choose to use that functionality, of course, you won't get that in Terraform. But if you stick with Terraform, pure Terraform that's working now, you can just update this engine configuration or config, and you'll get tofu. It's really as easy as that. There's really no problem there.
Awesome. Great to hear.
So as you can see, we're using OpenTofu. One of the rubric requirements is that for every change that comes in, we want to run a format check on it and then a validation. And that's done in this workflows section where we say for any directory that's modified, any state directory, we want to run format on it and validate. And if both of these succeed, then, or if the format succeeds, we'll run an init. And if the validate succeeds, we'll run the plan. So it's as easy as that to integrate that feature there. And we're going to take care of making sure the specific directory that has changed is run. And I'm actually going to go back to that in a second because one of the challenges in doing this was the Minicamp's default repo was kind of too simple to show off all the things you can do with Terrateam. So I had to make it a little more complicated to really express all the great things we can do. Another requirement of the rubric was cost estimation, simple as just enabled true. And we also have apply requirements here. And with apply requirements, you can actually do it down to the directory level, which directories require which apply requirements. So in this case, we're saying for any development work, don't require approvals in order to apply. And that's great if you just want to test new things and just go ahead. You don't want to, if you're iterating quite a bit, you don't want to have to wait for an apply on every single iteration.
So
However,
one
for
thing I'm
production,
noticing here is that you are, sorry, I just
go
wanted to
ahead,
bring
go
up,
ahead.
with GitHub Actions, really you're just running a bunch of bash scripts. And at the end of the day, you're having to run Terraform plan, Terraform apply, Terraform, whatever. You're just adding those switches. But what I'm seeing here is that this is completely native to Terraform/Tofu.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're getting, so we do have a server component, which is what's doing all this work for us, really. And that works no matter which engine you're using underneath. It works the same way. Another requirement was drift, right? So again, drift, as simple as enable true. And in this case, we're doing it on an hourly schedule, although you can do it on daily, monthly, weekly. We don't go below hourly just because we don't see a lot of value there. If you're drifting a lot between hours, I think there's some other workflow stuff you're probably going to have to look at before worrying about if drift is checking is going on frequently enough for you. The final thing, which is an enterprise/SaaS feature, I wanted to toss it in here. Again, we're open source. Not all of our features are part of open source. We are a business still at the end of the day, and there's a few features that we thought cater more towards larger organizations, but not to a smaller organization or especially individuals. And one of those is access control. You get it with the SaaS option, or if you're self-hosting, there's an enterprise plan there for you. But the value here is you get to do access control, and we have it really fine-grained. You can do access control, again, if you look at line 48, you can do it at the directory level. So this says any changes to the dev directory, anyone can plan or apply. And then for prod, we're using our default access control configuration, which is more constrained on who can apply and around that. We also have some options around who is allowed to modify the CI configuration file. So I don't know if you ran into this in the bootcamp, but one challenge with GitHub Actions is because the GitHub action is just in the repository. If you do want some sort of access control or apply requirement there, someone can always just modify the GitHub action to remove that or change it in a way. And we see things like this with not someone trying to be malicious, but the truth is sometimes people just don't understand exactly what is blocking them and they want to be unblocked and they just see a blocker and not the context of why that's there. But with something like Terrateam, we separate out what is enabling that or controlling that. Even though this is part of the repository, we always source access control from the main branch to make sure it's gone through approve and an approval process. And so you can't take that access control away if it's blocking you, which I think is really important if you're coming from a compliance and security perspective.
Right, right. I mean, I'm sure you can do some weird stuff like put it in another repository and source it from there. And but by the time you're done with all that extra work, you might as well hire another engineer because it's just a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, that's not the problem GitHub Actions is trying to solve, but is the problem we're
Right.
trying to solve.
Sure.
Controlling your infrastructure is really important and doing it in a structured way. So, all right, so with this config, I know it's a lot to take in, and it might not make a lot of sense at first, but I think we should see it in action. This repository, by the way, is public, so it'll be in the show notes or whatever Derek does for
Yeah,
that, so
yeah, I'll
anyone
share
can
it.
look at it, and I'll leave the pull request open for anyone to see. Before we get there, though, I just wanted to look at what changes I made to the structure just to be able to show off what we're doing here a bit more. Now, the original structure had a Terraform directory in it with all of the resources, and I split that out into two environments, a dev environment here and a prod environment. For the sake of this demo, they are the exact same. I just wanted to have two environments to show how that works. We also have a modules directory, so we can show off some module functionality as well. So we have a module that's going to be called shared, and we are going to use it in both dev and prod. So for the first thing, there's a requirement in the rubric of you cannot make a change that costs more than, I believe it's $10
Yeah, it was like
per
10
month.
bucks or something easy. Yeah.
I brought it down to something really small just to show off the functionalities there. The actual number doesn't really matter that much. So here, the change I wanted to make was I wanted to add a failover server to our Grafana setup. So in case the main one goes down, we can switch over to this one and it's up and ready to go. So that's the code change there. And we can see this ran. Now in our case, it failed. So why did that fail? Well, we get all the outputs here of what ran in as a comment to our pull request. If you're used to a workflow like Atlantis, we're very similar to that. So we get the output, we see the plan succeeded for our production setup. We can also see that the cost estimation is there. So we know it's the difference is around 839. But we see it failed, so why is that? So we set up a post hook for price, and we run conf test here, and we say that, I did set it to 10 actually. So we said our monthly cost is 16, and our limit is 10, so this change has failed. So great, we passed that. Now another feature I want to show off is our automatic module discovery. This allows you to include modules in your repository, the same repository as your code. And when you modify the module, we automatically discover who is impacted by that change and then run plans and applies for that. So we automatically determine this. So we see here, I just modified our shared module. I'm just using a null resource here to show off the functionality. We just from that one change, we see the dev directory ran and we see foo2 in there. That's our other resource, and then prod ran as well. And we see at the bottom here, foo2 as well. And as we can see, the only thing that happened was you updated the module, but Terrateam automatically determined that these are the impacted directories from that module change. And we can see we have this functionality around repository config. So we showed the config, but the config can be brought together through a few mechanisms. And in order to make debugging easier, sometimes you want to see what the config looks like as Terrateam is going to interpret it at the end of the day. So in order to do that, you comment Terrateam repo config into the pull request, and we can see it shows you where it sourced all the configs it's going to use for this. So we have a system's defaults, and then we have other this reference here. This comes from the main branch of this. We use the hash. So if you go back in time, you can find the exact hash that this config came from. Rather, if it just said main, you would say, all right, but what point in time was that main?
Sure.
And then the hash for your branch as well. And again, that's because your branch can be updated over time. So we want to use the hash so when you look at it, you know exactly the context you're looking at. So we consumed it. We push all this together through our merge algorithm. And we can see this is the list of directories. We have a prod directory, and we can see when that prod directory is triggered for a plan and apply, we've automatically updated the file patterns to include this module here. We'll note we didn't see that in the config we looked at earlier. We also see the shared module shared, so we discovered that, and we also know it's a module, so we set the file patterns, which decides how to trigger a directory, to empty, demonstrating that we don't want to run a plan or apply in here. And then we can also see for dev, we did the same thing where we added the modules directory there. So all of it is connected for you automatically.
Awesome.
I think that is pretty much the heart of the rubric. I
Yeah.
think takeaways for anyone is that this hopefully is pretty easy to set up, just a config file, and you're ready to go. There's not a lot of the work you have to do in action. Also, we're taking care of storing your plan for you so that you make sure whenever you apply that that plan is what's also applied. We also make sure that if somebody applies prod, for example, and you have work going on in prod, the plan you have is invalidated, so you don't try to apply with a plan that doesn't match what somebody else has changed. So we track all that state for you. We do blocks to make sure two people are not stepping on each other's toes in an update scenario, apply a scenario.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much the entire rubric, including the bonus material in a single config file. So that's pretty huge. I think several of the people, I know several of our members took at least 3 to 4 weeks to get this kicked out. I can imagine that this probably from scratch. I mean, I know we kind of cheated here. We already had it done, but from scratch, without knowing Terrateam, I imagine you could get through it in probably a day or two.
Yeah, it should be pretty quick.
Yeah.
One, like I said, one really meaningful value for us is that we want to fit inside of your workflow. So we want to be very configurable, very flexible. And that workflow can be that you want to run format and validate, or it could be that you want to apply before merge or after merge. We can do all of those things.
Okay. Any opinion on what people should do?
My personal opinion is that you should apply before merge, but that's just me. The software will handle any. You just apply and then merge, or merge then apply. You don't have to configure anything like that. I personally like and apply before merge because I think we're still not quite at the state in the Terraform world where you know that a plan is going to successfully apply. And iteration speed is important to me, so I think you can iterate faster if you don't have to make a new pull request after your apply has failed. Additionally, we in Terrateam, we have all these features to ensure that no one is going to be able to start modifying infrastructure that you are working on and trying to fix. So there's no fear of people stepping on each other's toes or anything like that. So it's safe to do it that way as well.
Sure. I like how you used the state of Terraform little thing there.
Yeah.
State of Terraform isn't ready to do it anyway. Uh,
Yeah.
so last question for you, and I think there might be some people interested to know why the hell did you open source? Are you on your last leg here, or is there a better reason? Is there a reason that you open sourced?
This was actually probably the most, how to put it, contentious discussion within Terrateam. We all had different views on if we should do it, why we should do it. I'll be honest, I was actually against it for a while. I was afraid it's going to eat up our business. What if this happens? What if that happens? And what we ended up doing was we're having trouble making progress in the discussion. So we stepped back. We all took a weekend to just write like a 1 or 2 page document describing our views on what it means to be open source, what are the benefits, what are the challenges. If we were to open source, what would that look like? And when we came back together, we ended up realizing we were much more aligned than we thought we were. And also, we could have a productive discussion about it. So what we decided in the end is, as I pointed out, there are some features that are enterprise. There are some features that are enterprise only. And we try to limit those quite a bit to really something that only larger organizations would need. So they're around compliance, they're around RBAC, those sort of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, the usual stuff that you see, but you still do state management and the things that everybody needs. You're not cutting out like really, really, really important stuff here for an individual
Exactly.
or a small company. So that's good.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that you didn't go to the desert and do a bunch of ayahuasca to figure this out. You actually did some smart stuff like writing down and having,
Yeah.
intelligent conversations about it. So more power to you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. It was important to us that the open source version was actually usable and functional for a lot of people. There's this great talk by Tim O'Reilly that actually impacted us a lot, and one it covers a lot of things, but there's one part in particular where it's create more value than you capture. And I think that change, once you look at it that way, it sort of changes your mindset of, okay, we're okay. We're not just okay, we're happy if some people use the open source version, never come to us for any of the paid features at all, and it just solves their troubles day in, day out, and they're just using it. And that's wonderful. And we think that the infrastructure world, the open tofu world, is growing, and there's just always going to be new people who do need that little bit more compliance and security features there. And that's great. That's what we want. We
I
want
mean, if
more
you
people
enable
to be
these people
succeeding on
to
the open source.
do, yeah, if you enable people to do big things, eventually they're going to end up somewhere where it's going to come back to you. And I think that's something I've seen, as I'm growing up through as I grew up learning all this infrastructure stuff and everything else, I take the things that enabled me in the beginning to other places.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, it's going to pay back eventually. And that's just kind of the way the open source world works, is people are going to give back one way or another. And hopefully that takes off. Because I mean, this is an incredibly useful tool. As we all know, again, everybody in the boot camp knows, we all fought GitHub Actions tooth and nail to get this thing to work. And it's still a very powerful tool, but in the long run, you've got something like this that is now safe. You've got the core stuff you need. You have everything you need. If you guys were to, hopefully not, but if you were to just bail one day, you've got this. You
Yeah.
can keep it together. Overall, I mean, I can't imagine a better tool right now to get you up and running in your normal workflow to help you deploy your resources properly.
Yeah. And, to be clear, like, I'm honestly very biased on Terrateam. I think it's a great product. But there's one great thing about where we are is there's a lot of options out there. So if being inside the pull requests all the time is not what you want, there's definitely options for you out there. Not all of them are open source. Not all of them are free to use, but they're there, and you can choose the one that works best for you.
Absolutely. Well, Malcolm, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sponsoring the bootcamp, first of all, but thanks for open sourcing this tool and allowing those that haven't finished their project to maybe just kick GitHub Actions to the side and simplify the whole thing, save themselves a little bit of time and get this done. On that note, is there any final thing you'd like to say?
Thank you very much for having me. Keep calm and tofu on.
Awesome. Cheers, everybody.